Look, just listen. You can't even imagine how one moment, one single cursed second, can flip a person's entire life upside down. I'm Jack. I'm 35. Until just a few days ago, I thought misery was just not having money, or busting my back for a scrap of bread, or running after that swindler Liam to get back the debt I'd scraped together with 1,000 agonies. But now that I'm stuck here in the middle of this absolute darkness, I understand what real misery is. Misery is the smell of dead earth never leaving your lungs. It's feeling like you've been underground for 1,000 years when it's only been a few hours since you could last catch your breath. It all started on that godforsaken night. The air was stiflingly humid. One of those heavy, suffocating village nights where even the mosquitoes can't be bothered to fly, and the trees seem to be whispering secrets to one another. I was coming back from the farm when I spotted Liam on the side of the road. He was in that junk heap of a car, that old clunker that always spewed smoke, heading toward his house. Something just snapped in my head. My blood boiled. I slammed on the brakes and swerved in front of him so hard, he had to veer onto the dirt shoulder. He got out with that self-righteous look and that filthy smirk he always had on the corner of his lip. It was as if it didn't even matter to him that he'd stolen my money and forgotten all about it. I told him, Liam, 30 million isn't a small amount of money for a guy like me who earned it through hard labor. You've been dragging me along for 3 months, saying today and tomorrow. My wife and kids are struggling while you're out here enjoying my money and laughing at me. He just turned and stared into my eyes. He looked at me like I was a piece of trash sitting in the middle of the road. He didn't care at all. His smirk deepened and he said, Jack, you talk too much. I don't have time for you. I gave your money to someone else. Go get it from them, and don't call me again. When he said that, it felt like a pot of boiling water had been poured over my head. My brain whistled. All the hardships I'd endured over those 3 months, all the nights I hadn't slept thinking about installments and debts, paraded before my eyes. My hand clenched instinctively. When I hit him in the face, I just wanted to wipe that cursed smirk off his lips. I wanted him to understand that you don't play with a man's life. But Liam wasn't expecting it. He lost his balance. His foot slipped on the gravel at the edge of the road, and he fell backward. Directly behind him was a heavy stone-cutting machine parked there, with sharp, jagged iron edges. The sound of his skull cracking, oh God, that sound is still in my ears. A dull, ugly thud, like a wet walnut being crushed under your heel. Liam didn't even have time to scream. He couldn't even call my name. His eyes just went wide. A short tremor ran through his body as if he'd been electrocuted. And then, it was over. Like a marionette whose strings are suddenly snipped, he collapsed onto the ground. His warm blood began to run through the gravel. I broke down. I knelt beside him. I said, Liam, get up, buddy. Don't joke around. But his eyes were fixed on the black sky, seeing nothing. Oh God, when I saw his blood running over that gray earth and the thirsty ground sucking the blood of my old friend, I felt my heart stop. I looked around. A tremor took hold of me. The village was in absolute silence. No one was there. Not a bird stirred. Only the sound of those cursed crickets came, sounding as if they were competing to mock me. I panicked. I was terrified. If they found out what I'd done, who would believe it wasn't intentional? I picked up his body. I couldn't believe how heavy a 30-year-old man, who was always so agile, could be after death. It was as if all the sins he'd committed in his life, all those lies and scams, had turned to lead at that very moment and clung to his body. I threw him into the back of my truck and pulled a bloody old sack over him. My whole body was shaking like a leaf. My teeth were chattering. I had to do something. If the sun rose tomorrow and they found out, I, Jack, who had lived a life of honor, would become the village murderer. I would be the man who killed his friend over money. I couldn't think of anywhere else but that old cemetery 2 kilometers from the village. The place where the trees are so tangled that even moonlight doesn't reach the ground, and people say it's haunted. The dirt road to the cemetery felt endless. Every meter I traveled, I felt someone was sitting in the back seat, stealing my breath. I felt a pair of eyes watching me in the side mirror. When I reached the entrance to the cemetery, the silence there was so heavy I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, like the sound of a drum. I found a grave, way off in the corner where the weeds had grown tall, under a weeping willow whose dry branches looked like the hands of an old woman. The headstone was black and cracked. With my trembling sleeve, I wiped the dust off to see who the owner was, whose peace I was about to disturb. It said, "Lucas, died 1980. I said to myself, "Dear Lucas, you were a noble man. Forgive me for coming to you unannounced. But you're used to this loneliness by now. Accept this poor Liam beside you so I can breathe again." I fell upon the ground with a shovel. The earth there was strange. It felt as if a layer of lead had been spread over the ground. It was cold and sticky and smelled of stagnation. Every time I struck the shovel into the ground, I heard a faint moan, like the cry of a baby, coming from beneath the dirt. I told myself, "Jack, don't be afraid. That's just the wind in the trees. That's just the shovel hitting the roots of the willow." Finally, I reached Lucas's burial slab. I cracked the grave open with immense effort. A pungent smell of stagnant earth and camphor hit my face, making me nearly retch. I dragged Liam from the back of the truck. His body was completely cold and stiff. I dropped him in there, right next to Lucas's skeletal remains. As he was falling, the wind suddenly blew and I felt his left fingers catch the edge of the grave, as if he were pleading not to be left there. But I kicked his foot down. Then quickly, as if the devil himself were chasing me, I shoveled the dirt over him. I set the headstone back in place and camouflaged it with nearby bushes and dry leaves so no trace remained. Cold sweat sat on my forehead and my hands were black. I went home. I thought it was over. I thought, "Jack, you won. No one knows. Your secret is buried." But as soon as I stepped into my bedroom, I smelled the cemetery earth in my nose. A thick scent that seemed glued to the lining of my lungs. A smell that, from that night on, never left my life. That first night I returned from the cemetery, I didn't close my eyes until dawn. Every time I blinked, the image of that cracked headstone and Lucas's name came before my eyes. Every small noise, even the creak of a door hinge, sounded like a police siren to me. I constantly thought someone from the village would come and catch me, or that someone had seen me digging from afar. But when the sun rose and the weak autumn light hit my face, I felt a little relieved. I told myself, "Jack, it's over. The cold earth covers everything and keeps secrets in its heart." But how foolish I was. I didn't know that some things, some sins, are so heavy that even thick layers of earth can't hold them back. It was the second night when real hell knocked on my door. Exhausted and worn out, with a mind burning from the pressure of guilt, I collapsed onto the bed. Just as my eyes were getting heavy and I was seeking refuge in that quiet darkness, I suddenly felt the air in the room change. The room had grown so heavy it felt as if the walls were closing in. The air had become thick and damp, so that I had to strain for every breath. In that state between sleeping and waking, I suddenly felt something like a cold clod of dirt hit my face. At first, I thought it was an insect or maybe a piece of plaster had flaked off the ceiling. I wiped my cheek, but my hand came away wet and muddy. I opened my eyes. In that absolute darkness, a stench hung in the air that penetrated to the marrow of my bones. The smell of stagnation, the smell of rotting meat mixed with damp earth. I turned on the light and saw something that stopped my breath. The ceiling of my room, right above my head, was raining dirt. Not ordinary dust that comes with the wind. It was as if someone was sitting in the second story, spitefully throwing handfuls of dark, wet cemetery earth onto my bed. I stood up and looked in horror at the wall that until yesterday had been pure white. My God, the plaster wall was cracking before my eyes. And from those deep cracks, a black, viscous liquid, something like tar or clotted blood, was oozing out. I sat on the edge of the bed and held my head in my hands. I whispered to myself, "Jack, this is all an hallucination from lack of sleep. This is just the after effects of the terror from that night." But at that moment, I heard a sound that tore through my soul. A scratchy, continuous sound, as if someone with long, sharp nails was scratching on an old wooden board. The sound was coming from under the bed. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't dare look down. I didn't even dare move. Suddenly a hand with no flesh on it, only bone with a piece of dry, leathery skin clinging to it, crawled out from under the bed and grabbed my bare ankle. The coldness of that hand. Oh, it was like pure ice pressed against my skin. I screamed and threw myself to the other side of the room with all my strength. When I looked at my leg, trembling, I saw my ankle had turned completely black. The mark of those 5 skeletal fingers was etched into my skin like a deep, bruised burn. At that very moment, I heard Liam's voice. The voice wasn't behind the wall. It wasn't outside. It was screaming right inside my brain. He was saying, "Jack, you heartless man. Why did you bury me with this beast? Jack, who is this person hacking me to pieces? It's so cramped here, Jack. They're skinning me alive and I can't even die." I was going insane. Liam was suffering down there, and his screams of pain were coming out of my own throat. That's when I saw his shadow for the first time. It stood at the end of the dark hallway. It was much taller than a normal person, thin and gaunt, wearing an old, tattered coat that smelled of earth. It was Lucas, the original owner of that grave. His face wasn't visible in the darkness, but 2 deep, black pits were where his eyes should have been, staring at me in a way that felt like they were sucking out my soul. I felt him screaming in my mind without speaking. His voice was like the grinding of large stones together. He was saying, "You stole my 40 years of peace. You brought a man full of sin and filth into my eternal home. Now that you've taken my peace, I'm coming to stay in your home." That night until morning, I stayed awake in the living room, shaking like a leaf. I had turned on every light in the house, as if I wanted to chase the darkness away, but Lucas's shadow constantly flickered in the corner of my eye. Every time I blinked from exhaustion, I felt my mouth fill with sand and dirt. I was dying of thirst. I went to the sink to wash my mouth, but when I turned on the tap, instead of clear water, small white worms crawled out, squirming over my hands and trying to get under my skin. By the 3rd day, I had truly reached the end of my rope. My eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. I went into the kitchen to eat a piece of dry bread, hoping my body would feel better. As I bit into the bread, I heard the sound of something snapping under my tooth. A sharp pain shot through my gums. I spat into my hand to see what it was. It wasn't a stone, it was a tooth. A decayed, black, long tooth that wasn't mine at all. Lucas was bringing his body parts, his cursed existence, into my life bit by bit. My whole body had begun to itch intensely. When I fearfully lifted my shirt, I saw strange words etched into my chest and stomach in bloody lines. It was as if someone had written them with jagged nails. "It's too crowded for the 2 of us." I couldn't stay in that house for another second. Everywhere I went, the stench of a corpse followed. Liam's screams didn't stop for a single moment, as if his purgatory was directly connected to the walls of my house. Lucas didn't want to kill me easily. He wanted to torture me. He wanted to drive me to wish for death out of pure madness. When night fell, that tall shadow came again. This time he came closer, so close I could feel the cold of his non-existent breath on my skin. He placed his long, skeletal hands on my shoulders and pressed down so hard I felt my collarbones were about to shatter. In that moment, he made me understand there was only one way to end this endless nightmare. I had to go back. I had to go there and dig that cursed corpse out of that stolen grave. Lucas didn't want a roommate anymore. He just wanted his solitary peace back. I couldn't take it anymore. With trembling hands, I grabbed the shovel. In that darkness and the heavy rain that had just begun, I hit the road. I had to go to the cemetery. I had to pull Liam out, even if I had to dig the earth with my fingernails. But I didn't know then that Lucas had set aside another empty space in that grave for me all along. The rain fell as if the sky wanted to wash away all the sins of the earth, but wretched me knew well that my sin, that black spot on my heart, wasn't something that could be washed away by seasonal rains. The dirt road to the cemetery was no longer a road. It had become a sticky swamp where it seemed the hands of the earth had reached out and wanted to chain the wheels of my truck. Somewhere along the way, my truck got stuck in the mud. No matter how much I revved the engine, there was only smoke and the smell of burning rubber. But I didn't care. It was as if an invisible force was pulling me toward that hill. I took the shovel and set out into the darkness on foot. Every step I took in that muck, it felt like the ground beneath my feet was moaning like a living thing. Liam's screams were no longer just in my head. They seemed to come from the bushes, from under the stones, and from the wet earth itself. From every direction, I heard him pleading with that raspy voice. "Jack, you coward, come get me out. They're burning me alive. Jack, Lucas won't stop." The wind through the bare branches of the trees was like the wailing of mourning women. Finally, I reached Lucas's grave. In the flickering light of the lightning, I saw something that froze the blood in my veins. Lucas's heavy headstone, the one I had placed with so much struggle, was cracked. A deep fissure ran through the middle of it, as if something from below had pushed with a supernatural power to break the stone in half. I didn't think about anything else anymore. I just wanted this nightmare to end. I fell upon the ground with madness. I shoveled with frenzy and terror. I threw the wet, heavy earth this way and that. My face was covered in mud, my mouth tasted of grave dirt, but I didn't stop. I had to get Liam out. I had to end this cursed neighborhood so Lucas would leave me alone. The deeper I went, the colder and heavier the air became, a cold that passed through the skin and sat on the bone. Suddenly, the tip of the shovel hit something hard. I thought I'd reached the slab, but when I cleared the mud with my hands, I saw no sign of a wooden board. Instead of wood, I was met with Lucas's cold, gnarled fingers reaching out from under the dirt. It was as if he had been waiting there the whole time, arms crossed, for my return. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet gave way. It was as if the earth opened its mouth and sucked me in. I slid and fell face first into the pit, right onto Liam's bloated and bruised body. The stench in that cramped space was so bad my eyes stung and I nearly vomited. Liam's body wasn't cold. It was burning hot, as if it had just been pulled out of a furnace. I wanted to get up quickly and get out of that cursed pit, but the edges of the grave had risen strangely high. No matter how much I reached for the walls, the wet earth slid and poured over my head. I reached out pleadingly to grab the stone edge, but suddenly two skeletal, dry hands, like two iron pincers, grabbed both my wrists. It was Lucas. He stood above the grave, his height reaching the sky in that darkness. In that dim light, I could only see the whiteness of his teeth smirking at me like a predatory animal. His eyes. No, he had no eyes. Only two deep pits full of hatred. Lucas's voice, like the grinding of stone on stone, as if his bones were rubbing together, echoed through the entire cemetery. "You were in such a hurry, Jack. You said Liam shouldn't be alone, didn't you? You said he wanted a roommate? Well, I'm so hospitable that I won't let you be alone. Your place has been vacant here for a long time." Terror paralyzed my entire being. I couldn't even breathe. Suddenly, I felt Liam's corpse beneath my feet start to move. The same corpse I had buried with these very hands suddenly opened its eyes. His eyes were empty, just two holes full of black, clotted blood. He wrapped his hot, trembling hands around my waist and pulled me lower with a strange strength into his own embrace. I screamed, I pleaded, I cried and said, "Lucas, I was wrong. I was wrong. Let me take him. Let me take the body somewhere far away. I'll even take him into my own house. Just let me go." But Lucas only stared at me with those empty pits, and there was no mercy in him. Suddenly, I felt a heavy mass pour onto my shoulders from above. At first, I thought it was part of the wall collapsing, but no, it was dirt. Lucas had taken my shovel and was coolly filling the grave. Every shovelful of dirt he threw onto my head felt like a mountain of lead being poured onto my chest. I screamed until my throat tore. "Don't. Lucas, for God's sake, don't. I'm still alive. Do you hear me? I'm breathing. Don't bury me alive." But my voice was lost between the roar of the lightning and Liam's horrific, broken laughter. Liam was laughing, a laugh that smelled of death. The dirt reached my waist. Its weight was crushing the ribs in my chest. Liam was clinging to me so tightly and pressing on my legs as if I were his only way of escape from that hell. He whispered in my ear with a trembling voice, "Welcome, Jack. Welcome, old friend. It's going to be so much fun for us here. Time ends here, Jack, forever, until the flesh falls off our bodies and our bones become one." The dirt reached my chin. I couldn't even scream anymore. My mouth was filled with cold earth and the worms that crawled in the ground. I saw Lucas for the last time as he pushed the heavy headstone with his foot. The stone turned with a massive thud and fell into place. Absolute darkness took over everything. A darkness you could feel even with your eyes closed. The last thing I felt was the weight of tons of earth pressing on my lungs and Liam's long fingers walking playfully over my face. Now I am here. I no longer hear the sound of rain. I don't feel the heat of the sun, and I don't see the moonlight. Here, under this black and old stone that says Lucas, 3 people now sleep. Lucas finally found the peace he wanted, because now he has 2 slaves beneath his feet to keep his place warm. Liam is still screaming from the pain of the tortures of the other world, and me who was buried alive, so my muffled screams would become an eternal lullaby for Lucas. If you ever happen to pass by that old cemetery and feel the ground shaking beneath your feet, or if the smell of burnt earth and stagnant meat reaches your nose, don't even look back. Just run, because we are down there, in that cramped 2-meter room, still fighting over those cursed 30 million and waiting for another person to come, a greedy person, a sinful person, so we can swap places with them and tie this cursed chain to their feet. Look, can you hear my voice? I'm right under here, right under your feet.
All the stories I share on my channel are written by me, and unlike other YouTube channels, they are not copied. So I would appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe to my channel to motivate me to write new stories.